Charlie Kirk just died. Now what? I've been seeing a lot of things online. I've been doing a lot of research, seeing how people are reacting and what they're choosing to externalize on social media, influencers, friends, and I wanted to come here to try to find some kind of way to make sense of this and give a little bit of insight, in my opinion, for how we can and should move forward. I'll just say I'm not a politician. I do not assert that I have all of the answers, but this is just a little bit of my observations, and I'm going to try to speak to both sides and to try to find some kind of middle ground. Basically, I'm trying to do what Jubilee promises to do and then ultimately does not do. I understand some people are mourning. I understand some people are celebrating, but there's a lot of us who are in between. Before I break it down into what I believe is the two main arguments across both sides of the political spectrum, I want to talk about gun control. In my view, there is absolutely no reason to believe that the issue of mass shootings, gun violence, school shootings, etc. is going to get any better unless we incorporate some level of gun control. Already, this is going to piss some people off, but I don't even think it's that arguable or even ideological of a perspective to have. The truth of the matter is we are going to have mentally ill people. We are going to have suicidal people because suicidal ideation is a major commonality across people who are perpetrators of mass shootings. And that is regardless of if people are more liberal leaning or more conservative leaning. We are probably farther away from eradicating people who are likely to commit mass terror and violence than we are eradicating the tools that they use to do so. Separately, there is now a conversation amongst the right about trans people and trans ideology being the reason that this violence is happening and therefore the target. And to that, I'm just going to say trans people exist and trans people are always going to exist. Regardless of your attitudes towards trans people, I'll say for me, I have trans friends. I value my trans friends. I do not think that the identity marker of being trans is at all a mental illness or however some people paint it. Regardless of where you stand in the political spectrum, do you really believe that that is going to be the reason why we no longer have violence? Because to me, that just sounds preposterous. But I just think that it is the fact of the matter that so long as we have people who are committed to violence and murder, this will just continue to be our new normal. On Instagram, I posed the question, how are you feeling about Charlie Kirk? To which I got one response from someone from my hometown. I'm from suburban metropolitan Detroit area in Michigan. So there's variation in political ideology. I know that they are leaning more conservative and I'm leaning more liberal or left. And they responded with this: only one way to feel. Horribly, horribly saddened that a dad, a husband, a son was taken. To which I actually reached out to basically ask the question about, okay, does this sadness and the reaction of this horrific incident make you inclined to think that there should be some gun reform or some changes to gun control? They ultimately said no. That people should not believe that there should be some kind of change or gun reform. They said, to me, the gun obviously carries out the crime, but it's the person that needs to be regulated. Not anti-gun, but anti-violence. And no, I don't think that this event will change gun control. Should it? Also not necessarily. The person could have used a bow and arrow if they really wanted, since they are filled with that much hatred. Now, I have a lot of different opinions or reactions to this statement, but ultimately one thing that I want to point out is that at the end of the day, yes, violence may prevail, but in my work as a suicide counselor, one thing that we know statistically is true is that when a gun or a firearm is involved, lethality is much more likely. Another response that I would have is that just because a policy or something would be flawed or isn't perfect, is that a reason why we shouldn't believe that it should exist? No policy is perfect and going to 100% work all the time. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean that we should just negate the concept as a whole. Another person in my comments to a reel that I posted basically said, so what does gun control actually look like? My understanding is that a lot of conservatives are against the idea of gun control because it's not going to solve the problem immediately. There are going to be flaws, i.e., okay, so law-abiding citizens are going to give up their guns and their firearms. What about the people who are most likely to kill other people or to be violent against other people. So now we have a problem where only the violent people are going to have access to those guns. And for me personally, I actually think that this is a pretty valid thing to say or a valid concern to have. But here's the thing. There is such a thing as being preventative. For me personally, and I think that this exists for a lot of left-leaning people, when we think about gun reform and gun control, we understand that it's going to be more future-oriented. It's going to be a long-term solution that maybe we will not necessarily see all of the benefits of in real time. But it's kind of like investing, where the best time to do it is yesterday, and the next best time to do it is today. Another point I want to make to this argument that violence will persist no matter what is that, yes, violence will persist and violent people will persist, but the likelihood that lethality will occur will go down if guns are not involved. Like, yes, someone could bring a bow and arrow. Some person could bring a knife. But if you look at the number of deaths, either by firearm versus a knife in 2023, the numbers are starkly different. According to the CDC and the FBI, firearms were the most common method used in US homicides in 2023, accounting for 79% of all murders. Handguns and firearms, using my math and my adding abilities, amounted to about 12,000, more than 12,000 cases, whereas knives or cutting instruments amounted to under 1,600. What I don't like about the very hard right's attack on the idea of gun control is that it's contingent on the idea or the notion that it is going to be 100% successful. We know that it's not going to be 100% successful. Can you think of any law or policy that is 100% successful? No. I mean, just look where we are now, right? But I don't think that the logic that, oh, this is not going to be 100% successful or this is not going to make the problem go away 100% should prevent us from wanting to go more in that direction. Again, because the alternative is no direction. The alternative is let's just continue doing what we're doing and people can defend themselves. We should have more people having guns. If the alternative, aka doing nothing, was good or was working, then Charlie Kirk wouldn't have been shot to death, in my opinion. And one point that I also want to add with this is that if the majority of liberals or left people were vindictive, or if they were truly evil, or even if they were petty, then actually their rationale or their belief would probably be to be against gun reform. Why? Because guns took one of their enemies or attackers out. But at least on my timeline, and at least in my communities, that is not what we are advocating for. Now I want to break it down based on what I see from the extreme right and the extreme left, and my response to both of them for how we can maybe meet in the middle a little bit. From the extreme right, if you are someone who listened, who followed, who trusted Charlie Kirk, it makes sense that you are in mourning. But one point I really want to make is that I do not think Charlie Kirk is a perfect victim. In our digital age, it's becoming increasingly less clear to know when someone is guilty of something terrible happening and when someone is not. In the past, when we didn't have social media, when we didn't have methods to proliferate hate speech, hate in general, people who influenced culture and influence something like Nazism, for example, were the quote unquote politicians who had the physical power. And now that is not always the case. Now we have people who are the faces and people who are, let's just use the word influencers, who influence culture, who influence ideas that get proliferated by the masses. And those ideas can motivate actions. It is a less direct form of producing violence or producing actions that could be viewed as violence. It is harder to know how much responsibility he had or has for tragedies occurring. Was he the one who gave a bunch of school shooters a gun? No. Was he the one who specifically told men who harmed women, or not even women for that matter, to do it? Also, no. But the rhetoric that he spewed against a plethora of communities, the LGBTQ plus community, women, people who are not Christian, Muslim people, Palestinians, Black people, brown people, the list goes on and on. We will not know the extent to which his, in one view, provocative and in another view, hateful remarks and the ideas that he was promoting. We will not know how much of that is responsible and how much of that motivates acts of terror and acts of violence. Even from a legal perspective, there is such a thing as hate speech and violence outside of just physical violence. So for the right, instead of just viewing someone who may be not upset about the passing of Charlie Kirk, instead of viewing their opinion as inhumane, disgusting, and vile, it could be worth trying to utilize empathy, which famously we know is something that Charlie Kirk did not like or support. It could be useful to at least try to see where people are coming from, particularly if they are part of a community that Charlie Kirk has villainized. Another thing that I want to speak to is my observation that a lot of people on the right, or a lot of people who are conservative, are saying that Charlie Kirk did not deserve to die because he is a son and a father. To which I just want to say, every man is a son. Every man is someone's son. And a lot of those men are fathers. And just because someone has family does not make them good nor bad. I think that if we were so concerned with every victim's family members, then we would be far more outraged when watching videos of Palestinian families when their children are killed or bombed. But because we do not know them, or because we do not care enough to know them or to look at those images, a lot of the right just doesn't care as much. I will also add that I have a lot of sympathy for his family who witnessed that, because people do not deserve that. Now, one take that I thought was pretty balanced was from a creator who I follow, shout out Nathan June, and he posted, "So why is this getting so much attention then? I've been thinking about that all day, and I think I know. We don't get to see the video usually. We don't get to see the reality of it. It usually happens to people we don't know. Love or hate him, we all felt like we knew Charlie Kirk, and that's why I think the reaction has become so intense. But 24 hours later, do I have empathy for Charlie? No, because empathy literally means putting yourself in their shoes, and I don't know what it's like to put that much hate in the world. Do I feel awful for his 1-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter? Yes, because anyone should. Is the image of his neck exploding forever ingrained in my skull? Yes. Does it make me want to become an even louder voice for ending gun violence and introducing stricter gun laws? Absolutely." And I thought that that was well put, and I'm very curious to see how people would respond to that. Now I'm going to speak to the other side of the political spectrum. One argument that I do think is an issue is the idea that Charlie Kirk deserved to die in the way that he did because of who he is. There is a large population of people who are probably going to go to bed a little bit more calmly knowing that someone with, I believe, it was around 5 to 6 million followers, will not continue to lead a movement of sorts in a direction that antagonizes them. But I don't necessarily think it's productive to jump too much into this, oh, it's good that he's dead kind of direction. I do believe that political violence is wrong, though I do also think that there are varying degrees of political violence, this being a very extreme degree. But I would also ask, what is the goal or what is the intention of saying that? Because if it's not going to be Charlie Kirk who's going to lead this MAGA revolution, it's going to be someone else. And we already know that there are multiple people who are going in this direction. And it's probably not realistic to think that we're just going to kill all of them, because the sentiment that he fostered and created and ignited in people very clearly worked. So really my response is more in terms of practicality and trying to be realistic, because I think that a lot of people on the left already know that this will probably have a lot of negative backlash and consequences, and we're already seeing threats happening on HBCUs, for example, even though that in my mind makes very little sense. Now, to close, I want to give some of my 2 cents and my thoughts to make a final point in trying to analyze and trying to see the middle ground across people's viewpoints. Charlie Kirk created community, but he created community out of division. He generated a level of comfort and a level of community for people who don't want to see and focus on the negative from the perspective of where we are in this country. They don't want to be subject to the negativity of what may be happening outside of their local communities, whether it's the ICE raids, whether it's the school shootings, whether it's threats to same-sex marriage. He made people feel like things are okay. At the same time, this is not the only thing that he did, because he simultaneously did that and instilled fear in people. He spewed hate and he lied about COVID, about the death of George Floyd, about the 2020 election. He said things like there should not be an exception for abortion for rape. He generated hate for a common enemy and misguided people's views to prevent the very society that he claimed to be an advocate for. He claimed to spread common good values from a religious standpoint. He wanted to get rid of people who are outside of that mold. He created unity amongst groups, but more division between those groups. Bringing it into my personal life, one of my takeaways is I just hope I am not and never become someone who people want dead. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. I honestly think that I can say that from a truthful place. And I do hope that we can move forward, especially young people, especially Gen Z, to make this productive as opposed to something that will just continue to incite more chaos. If you made it to the end, I want to thank you for watching, whether you agree with me or not. And honestly, I'm very curious to know your thoughts because I genuinely want to use this as an opportunity to learn more, to listen more, to actually have conversations, even though they can be hard. So please follow along. Follow me on Instagram at Eric Say More. Follow this channel if you want to see more content that is kind of combining the personal and the political in this time. All right. Thanks. Bye.